All right, Mark, you wrote a whole book on Trump's rise. You studied him, and we heard from him at the stock exchange this morning, again, laying out an ambitious plan for the economy.
I think you're going to see some very good days ahead. A lot of incentives are going to be given. We're really talking about lowering taxes. Last time, as you know, we took it probably from close to 44, 45% down to 21. Everyone said that was impossible. Now, it was always I really wanted to get it down to 15, and we'll be able to do that. I think we're going to really incentivize the country to go back and work, and they will be incentivized. They're going to do well. People are going to be very happy.
So look, Mark, it is quite a moment. He's, ringing the opening bell on the stock exchange. People are cheering for him. He has the Time cover of Person of the Year behind him. But knowing him, studying him the way you have, does history tell us this will be a moment he reads or potentially overreads as empowering?
Well, for Donald Trump, the recognition from Time magazine is very important. He has, in many ways, he is stuck in the media world that he grew up in when Time magazine was a dominant force in the American landscape. The very first time I interviewed Trump, he ushered me into a room just away from his office and said, "I just discovered this." And we walked into a room that consisted of a large conference table filled entirely with piles of magazines with him on the cover. Many of them were old Time magazines. So this has, and somehow he wanted me to believe that he just discovered this room. But it gives you an idea of how vital it is to him to have that recognition from the very same kinds of institutions that he attacks all the time. The other thing that I noticed in the Time interview with Trump is that he was asked about his plans for the coming term, and he said, anything can happen. And I think far more than being emboldened to bring new reforms or a new ideology to the country, a new path forward, he is looking to kind of continue the show, the chaos that we saw in the first term, perhaps more so this time. And that sort of show is what he's all about, that anything can happen mentality. We see that in his cabinet choices, which are all over the board ideologically, from Marco Rubio, Bobby Kennedy, Kash Patel. There's no consistency there. There's no ideology. There is chaos. There is the show. There is each day ratcheting up the attention from the previous day.
Yeah, and wanting to get his way, right? And I think, Eddie, one of the telling things about the Time magazine interview was he was asked about possible recess appointments, and he said, "I really don't care how they get them approved, as long as they get them approved." Give me your sense, as a keen observer, about this moment for Trump. Any chance he sees an opportunity, for example, for his legacy, work on how history will judge him in a way that might suppress some of his more, questionable instincts or just instincts for chaos?
Well, first of all, it's great to see you, Chris. I wouldn't bet the house on it. Donald Trump is who he is. I think it's very clear that his legacy, to his mind, has been established in the fact that he ran and won for a second time. He has an agenda. It might not be ideologically driven, but he has an agenda. That agenda is bound up with a set of precepts, a set of commitments that I think represent a fundamental danger to American democracy. And let me say this, it's disheartening to see Donald Trump ringing the bell at Wall Street, right? It shows us the kind of deep connection between his candidacy, what he represents, and the element of greed and selfishness in this country. It's disappointing to see the folks around him. You see how the lack of diversity on the floor, everywhere. That's not the America that I grew up in. It's not the America that you live in. And I understand Time magazine and what it's doing, but part of my worry, Chris, is that we're normalizing this guy. If he was a danger or threat to American democracy before he was elected, to my mind, he remains so. Even as the president-elect of the United States.
So let me ask you something else about, I think it fits under that general category, Eddie, of normalization. We just got word that the president-elect is now tapping Kari Lake, who failed in a run for governor and Senate, to lead the federally funded news outlet Voice of America. Voice of America reaches an astonishing 326 million adults globally every week across all of its platforms. But listen to what she said in 2022, just a couple of years ago.
These monsters in the press they'll cut that out and they'll say Kari Lake is against underwater basket weaving professionals.
All right, press, make sure you get it right.
I shouldn't even call them the press, the propagandists.
The propagandists, yes. So.
Yes, let's defund the press, the media.
Yeah.
Defund the media.
Defund the monsters and propagandists. Is this another example of Donald Trump putting someone in charge of an entity that person seems to despise, that the work they do is belittled in such a dismissive way?
Well, yes, and let's be clear, Kari Lake was in the press. She knows exactly how this
was a TV anchor.
Works. Exactly. So, in so many ways, it's just projection and performance. And look, we'd say that Donald Trump is non-ideological. I think we need to be careful in that regard. He's not an ideologue in the sense that he's strict, but he has a certain set of commitments. And Kari Lake will be his mouthpiece to the world. It's going to be, how can I put it, MAGAism is going to be one of our chief exports. And I think we need to understand the implication of that. This is just another sign of the chaos that will ensue, but it's ordered chaos. It's purposeful chaos. And we need to be mindful of that as well.
It brings it all together, doesn't it, Vaughn? When you hear what both Eddie and Mark have to say about the performative nature of Donald Trump, that he also seems to admire so much in the people he wants to surround himself with and now put into his administration. Another example, for example, Pete Hegseth, whose most recent career had been on Fox News, right? There is a Politico report in a shift of strategy there. They say that Trump and his allies are now cracking down, have a new, more confrontational approach with coordinating with outside forces to try to grind senators into submission. It's part of the performance, right? This whole thing of let's make this a very public fight and one that we're going to win.
And if you're the likes of Joni Ernst and Bill Cassidy, you have Senate re-elections up in 2026. I was talking to somebody yesterday who is aware and understanding of the view within the Trump transition of Donald Trump's posture right now to some of those senators like Joni Ernst. And I was told that, number one, Donald Trump is laying low here at the moment and not coming out with explicit threats to primary them. At the same time, if for Joni Ernst specifically, if she had thought at any point in time that she may be the defense secretary replacement pick to Pete Hegseth, that is all but gone as a possibility because she is standing in the way of a clear path for Pete Hegseth. At the same time here, this is a moment for Republican senators here, if you give them the benefit of the doubt that they ran for political office for the purpose of serving the constituents of their state, to go and fight on behalf of them. This is more than potentially an inability to work with Donald Trump on nominees on who's going to be his cabinet, but also when it comes to the budget, the committees they work on, the extent to which they can pick up the phone and reach the Oval Office or those within the administration. It would be a tough 2-4 years ahead for some of these Republican senators if right off the bat they have a brick wall between them and the White House because they're standing in the way of some of these picks.
Yeah, even if they're not up for re-election for another 6 years. So, Mark, you had an interesting column. You talked about this showdown that's developing between Trump and his allies on one side and what they call the deep state, including civil servants you describe as the main protectors of American society. And in that new interview we've talked about with Time Magazine, Donald Trump suggests that he might be open to firing civil servants if they don't back his policies. How is that going to play out?
Well, all odds, it's not going to play out. He's going to make a big show, just as he will with deportations. He'll make a big show of doing some raids at factories. The same kind of thing may happen with federal workers, where he may try to relocate an agency or two. He did that in his first term. How did it work out? Within a year or two of that decision, the agencies were back to full force. They were back working where they'd originally worked. So there is a major gap between what Trump wants to do, which is blow things up, turn things upside down. Well, that's what voters elected him to do. That was his message in all of his campaigns. But there's a giant gap between that and his competence and staying power and interest level, which all sort of mitigate in the other direction. He once told me that he's all about getting things and much less about doing them once he's gotten it. And so I think that was a rare moment of real insight that he had into himself, where he genuinely loves the winning. We all know that he hates losing. And once he has the opportunity to do the work, he doesn't really have the interest or staying power. And I think the Kari Lake example is a perfect example of that. That is not a presidentially appointed position. Sure, he would like her to run the Voice of America. He's going to try to move things so that she gets that position. But there's a separate independent board that makes that decision. And so that sort of lack of knowledge or interest in how government really works hindered Trump in the first term. I think it'll do so even more the second time around.